Hello, team, and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. This is Ukraine War news update for the 12th of June 2023. I hope I'm with it today. I had a 3-hour live interview last night on my latest book, finished at 1 o'clock in the morning. Yeah, that's a lot of talking yesterday, I can tell you. So let's go to where we usually start, the opening gambit for today's piece. And someone called me out on using the term opening gambit. It also means just a way of starting a conversation, as per the Cambridge Dictionary. So, let's have an argument about language. Okay, so 540 liquidated personnel. So the Ukrainian general staff here reporting the figures. All the usual caveats apply, and these there are fewer numbers of losses across all the categories. It seems so. I don't know what that tells us. Again, I present these figures because they tell you a story about what's happening. They give you trends, give you an indication of what's going on the front line. I don't know if this is the inability of I guess units on the front line to be able to track their losses. They're right in the heart of the battle. It's maybe more difficult to get figures to the general staff, or there are just fewer losses. Now, why would that be? Are the Ukrainians doing less well? Are they really struggling? Is it because of the type of activity that's taking place just isn't the type that involves huge amounts of losses of mechanized equipment and troops? They're taking sort of towns as settlements where, like Blahadatny yesterday is one settlement that they took without firing a shot. So they're taking ground but not engaging with Russians. Russians are retreating to better positions, as they would say. So it's just trying to work out exactly what explains this drop in figures. So 5 tanks and 5 APVs, 10 artillery systems. So that's again much smaller category losses. 7 UAVs, so 7 drones, 10 vehicles and fuel tanks, and 1 piece of special equipment. Just, yeah, not a lot across the board. There's a lot more footage coming out to support the earlier higher figures from yesterday and the day before. And this is from some days back, a Russian RP-377L LA Lorandit electronic warfare system destroyed in the occupied part of Kherson. That would be something that fits into the special equipment category at the bottom there. So we are seeing electronic warfare systems being taken out routinely. This is pretty significant. So Ukrainian forces, with the help of drones, destroyed a Russian logistics base, in other words, a high-value target. You can clearly see at least 3 military trucks, of which one receives a direct hit. Some saying these were, as you can see here, these were HIMARS, caught on drone footage. So let's have a look at this. Let's make sure it's muted because, yeah, they're going to play some pretty loud music for sure. Now, this is a significant hit or series of hits, as you can see here, and quite a bit of equipment. HIMARS, so a volley of HIMARS rockets from one HIMARS or Gimler's launcher 6. So there's more than, and you can see something electrical going up there. This is more than one volley from one HIMARS launcher, it looks like. And then secondary explosions going on. Unless that was 6, I don't know. My counting's not very good. That is a significant hit that takes out logistics, takes out ammunition. There's sort of talk about, Russian troops not having enough food, not having enough ammunition, not having enough medical supplies. And when you see hits like this, when you go back to it, not so much yesterday but the day before, there were over 30 vehicles and fuel tanks taken out, then you can understand why some Russian troops might be suffering. Right, this is a bit of news. I mean to share this yesterday but forgot, or just after I did my video I came across this. So Russian MOD has released footage of a naval drone being destroyed on the approach to what they claim is a Priazovye in the Black Sea. So this is another ship in the Black Sea, and they've claimed to have taken out 6 naval drones. There's footage of one getting taken out. Just for your delectation, I can put it on screen. So this is rather similar to the Ivan Kurs that was claimed to be hit, that the Russians claimed they took out a whole bunch of naval drones, very similar to this, but there was footage from the Ukrainians that a drone at least got as far as the hull, and then it cut out. So you'd assume it exploded, and the Ivankurs supposedly came back to Sevastopol, and there's supposedly footage of it. People are trying to date that footage, but basically we haven't heard much about it. There's still people on the socials saying, "Where's Ivan Kurz?" And there's still a bit of lack of information about it. We've got another ship here. I guess it seems like this one is is definitely still up up and about. I mean, that's footage that's definitely come from it there that you can see. Anyway, Russian MOD claiming that uh, they have beaten back all the naval drones there, and that's fairly similar positioning to the Ivan Kurs working on the pipes, I guess, in the south of the Black Sea. Um, but yeah, I'll see if there's more information out on that as the day progresses. Now we're going to go to some more losses for the Ukrainians in that same place, in that same instance that we've seen all that footage of the lost uh, Leopard tanks and Bradleys and MRAPs and whatnot. So there's more footage that's come out or from the 47th Mechanized Brigade's rash dash into a Russian minefield. It's not a good look, and in fact, it's worse than you might think, in my opinion. So, 3 out of the 6 donated Leopard 2R mine clearing vehicles are damaged, abandoned in one field. They can't be recovered and repaired. Attrition like this will have a large impact going forward. This is true. The one upside is that footage is from the same area in the same day as the previous Leopard 2 and Bradley losses. It seems that this is the only major failed counterattack, so Russia is milking it for all it can. Um, as so, the extra footage seems to include these ones. I think at the bottom, I thought there was some. Where is it? Okay, no, I don't have it. Oh yeah, here it is. So this tells you what is new and what isn't from what has already been recorded. A new track. So they obviously, try to really get around here, get around all the blown up vehicles and make that dash for the Russian lines, but took further losses. Indeed, here we have one Leopard 2A6, one M2A2, one International Max Pro, 3 Leopard 2R mine clearing tanks, and one Vicent mine clearing tank. So those last 4, that is massive. They don't have many of these, right? They've only got 6 of the Leopard 2Rs. Now, I don't know how destroyed those Leopard 2Rs are and whether they're recoverable, whether they're just damaged, but this is not a good outcome. The Ukrainian army has already lost half of its unique Leopard 2R breaching vehicles, says Forbes. They are going to need this going forward because actually, we're going to come onto this a little bit later, so I might just wait for a bit to talk more about this, but they haven't really reached the Russian defenses yet. It seems actually where they have lost these is the closest to those Russian defenses, and they will need all the breaching vehicles they can get their hands on to be able to breach those defenses. And this is what I was talking about, the difficulty of the challenge that those defenses do provide for the Ukrainians will be real, is real. The minefields will be a massive challenge. Whereas I think some people were looking more positively on the situation, saying, well, look, the Ukrainians can conceptually, in principle, they can easily overcome these challenges. It was like if all your ducks are in a row and everything and the wind's blowing in the right direction, and the Russians aren't doing anything, then yeah, you can breach these with if you've got all your breaching vehicles and they don't get hit. But when you start having situations like this, then everything now becomes more difficult in terms of negotiating those defensive fortifications. Uh, that's not to say that there isn't lots of footage of Russian losses. So here's one of a column of Russian tanks. Well, I think 4 Russian tanks, 4 or 5, uh, driving down a road and then going off road and then being taken out by artillery. Looks pretty precise artillery. At least 2 of these tanks are taken out. Um, and yeah, some pretty good artillery accuracy taking place here. But this is the importance. There's several things to note from this exchange. One, the importance of drones to spot. So clearing out the sky with drones, but then these are small bits of kit. They're really difficult, even with Gepards and things. It's like, needle in a haystack. It's really difficult to take these drones out. I think electronic warfare is your best option, because you can't really see them in the sky, to shoot down with whatever weaponry you have. But anyway, the other thing to notice from this video is the fortifications that you can see. In the field just below this that was in the earlier footage. So it goes back to that challenge of overcoming fortifications as well. They seem to be here. Look, no, it's sort of cut away. But you can see them going into the tree lines. There's a trench line in there. Yeah, as you can see at the bottom of the footage here. Um, Extensive, I guess, in this area, but then if they don't go across everywhere, then there are breaks in those fortifications and trench lines. So anyway, Russians lost a couple of tanks in that exchange, at least one completely taken out and one possibly damaged. And then here's some footage of a Leopard 2 tank firing, and it shows the advantage of it being able to shoot and move in a way that T family tanks can't do as effectively. You got the fire control systems on board of these tanks are just far superior to the old Soviet era tanks. Just yeah, interesting to see this footage coming out. So we are starting to see footage coming out from the Ukrainian front lines. Now, the other thing that I've seen a number of losses for the Russians over the last week are TOS 1A, these thermobaric multiple launch rocket systems. And this is quite a big loss. They've lost quite a few of these over the last week, being taken out by various means, and these cause quite some significant damage to the Ukrainians. They're pretty horrible psychologically. They're nasty as well. Right, this is a first-person view drone taking out a T-80 tank, and remarkable because these are 10 a penny, these drones, and they have the your RPG-7 or similar munitions on board. They're really effective, but they shouldn't really be able to take out a pretty decent tank. Um, I guess these things are all relative, right? But as far as Russians are concerned, T-80 tank, it's okay. But yeah, taken out by an FPV drone is not good, and it does genuinely go up. It doesn't look like there's much of a fire there, and then it catches, and then yep, that's that tank. That's the end of that bad boy. So FPV drones are really a problem, actually, for both sides, but much more an issue for the Russians because I think the Ukrainians just have that many of them. Right, moving on. Another liquidated Russian Guards colonel, and there was one I didn't report the other day that took place in the Belgorod region, like a second colonel. So I reported on one being killed. I think a second one was killed in Belgorod with those incursions of the Russian volunteer forces. I need to confirm that. But yeah, some losses of high value military personnel here. Okay, it's reported that in Yakimivka, Zaporizhia region, a railway bridge was blown up by local partisans. Yakimivka, a logistical hub on a railway connection between Zhankoy and Melitopol. So just to let you know, Zhankoy is here and Melitopol is there. This is a railway hub, and there's a bridge that's been taken out. There's Yakimivka just south of Melitopol. So that bridge being taken out is super important. I'm not sure if the Ukrainians themselves took out a bridge as well recently. That may have happened. So they're going to be trying to hit these logistics in a serious way, the Ukrainians. Russia on fire. Huge fires raging in Rostov right now. This was yesterday. On a cloudy day, it's getting even darker by the minute. A thick black smoke fills the sky too. The Rostelmash agricultural manufacturing plant is on fire. I should have reported that in my yesterday's video. I think it came out just before the video, but I missed that one. But anyway, another instance of that. Right, let's go and have a quick look at what's going on the front line to try and give you a concise synopsis. So the first thing to note is some claims from the Wagner affiliated Telegram channels or pro Wagner channels. So there's some issues going on with Wagner at the moment with regard to the Russian MOD wanting to pull them under their own sort of remit, and that's all happening. Anyway, this is escalating rather quickly now. Says Tim White, a Wagner-aligned channel has just posted these two gems on Telegram, including a mission of a 5 to 6 kilometer loss in Bakhmut, and the collapse of the front has begun, and likening it to the retreat from Kharkiv. Says AP. At the moment, the crest was able to move 5 to 6 kilometers deep into our territory. Let me remind you that the advance of 5 to 6 kilometers in the Bakhmut direction cost the musicians extraordinary efforts and time. I conclude that the expletive troops, that's the regular Russian forces, under the leadership of Shoigu, have almost near zero combat capability. And then again, it's already clear that the collapse of the front has begun. Everything else is blah, 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 and complacency. Kharkiv region repeats. Then to Boryarozhin, told about ingenious defensive operations, that the snow leopards were holding on and the reserves were about to come up. In fact, at that time, the expletive troops, the Russian conventional forces, under leadership of the Tuvan degenerate, fled wherever they looked, and through the latest T-90M in good condition. The Surovikin line, so there's a defensive line that General Surovikin put in place before he was kind of moved sideways and down, which the military correspondents are now hiding behind, is Kuzmich's booths and pyramids that cannot stop anyone. So these dragon's teeth, they just can't stop anyone. In the Belgorod region, there was also the Surovikin line, and she could not detain any of the enemy's deep reconnaissance groups. So really damning claims here by Wagner, particularly concerning Bakhmut. Now, there were these claims in, it's funny, some pro-Russians on my thread were putting these yesterday, which is Bakivka. That's a little place north of Bakhmut, northwest of Bakhmut, where there's a reservoir, and the Ukrainians have been knocking on the door of Bakivka for a couple of days, and the Russians are saying, no, they haven't got Bakivka, no, they haven't got Bakivka. Then they announced yesterday, we've retaken Bakivka. Hang on, you said that it hadn't been lost, so you are lying at least somewhere here. And it turns out, well, the Ukrainians hadn't even claimed to have taken it. They were just fighting on the outside, and then they're saying there's this big counterattack in Bakivka. Anyway, it seems they're struggling there, the Russians. Anyway, just interesting that how they sell things. Russian lines continue to fall apart. The town of Storozhevo, as well as Levadne, have been liberated. Ukrainian forces already hammering Russian troops in Makarivka and Urozhaine. With the situation unfolding, it's unlikely it is likely that there is no serious Russian presence in Novodarivka and Rivnepil unless they want to be encircled. So where's this all taking place? This is in Velika Novosilka, where they're talking about Storozheve. Actually, that's already been lost. I haven't updated my maps yet, by the way. So Makarivka apparently has been lost, and the Ukrainians are arguably either in Staromayorsk and Urozhaine, or they've taken those as well. They're basically advancing down this river here, and they're able to do so because they're taking the land on the high points either side. And then Levadne's over here, that has apparently been taken, possibly Novodarivka, where it's been kind of encircled there. So there have been these kind of movements all the way down, but I will give you a little bit more detail about what that means. So 35th Marine Brigade, the Ukrainian Naval Infantry, so these are, as it says, Marines, released footage today from recently liberated town of Storozhevo. So that is now, that's geolocated and official. You can see these places, Makarivka down into Staromayorsk and Urozhaine, seem to be either taken or in the middle of being taken. It's really dynamic because a lot of activity takes place at night. So you get these reports coming out from, in my time last night, you think, well, that's a day's fighting done. Well, actually, no, they are doing more. There are some claims that they are doing more fighting at night than they are in the daytime. Wargonzo may be right. I hate saying that. And I think he confirms that Staromlnivka is a trigger point for the commitment of more strategic Russian reserves in line with the Russian defensive doctrine. He says that Makarivka was a serious loss. Okay, so Wargonzo, Rebar, the Russians are admitting that all these places have been lost, and it is pretty problematic. And actually, there are claims that, here it is, Wargonzo says that if the Ukrainians reach Staromlnivka, then the situation for the Russians becomes critical. Okay, let's just explain that a little bit. This is really worth explaining. So as they come down here, they're saying that if they lose this place, Staromelnivka, then things become critical. If we go to what Kenneth Kenneth Gregg, the Finnish fighter that's in Ukraine somewhere, says about this. And sometimes, some of his claims are a bit meh. Sometimes there are some nuggets. So at 3 o'clock in the morning, MOD, Russian MOD, confirmed that Makarivka had been liberated. Well, that could be Ukrainian. At the same time, Russian blogs informed that Ukrainian forces are in Staromayorsky. In terms of distance, this is quite realistic for a light motorized unit. From a tactical point of view, it's logical to try to advance as quickly as possible before the Russians' reinforcement from the Kherson Oblast arrives. It looks like the Russians think the same way and tried to prevent us by blowing up a small dam again. So the Russians have blown up a dam because they're good at that, right? In the Tavria direction, confirmed that they've blown up a dam at Mokry Yala River in the Zaporizhia in order to slow down Ukraine's counteroffensive. He added that it will not affect the ongoing offensive action, so not as bad as one might think. The river channel is flooding, but not to such an extent that it prevents us from attacking. When we take Staromayorsk, there is only 15 kilometers left of where the Russians have the last defense unit. After that, it's a clean road to Mariupol. That said, we use minimal troops and have large forces ready to attack where we penetrate the Russian lines. We have operations in 4 more places in the Zaporizhia region. The Bakhmut front continues to have radio silence, but the brigades there have reported partial successes, so on and so forth. I'm not going to go to that. So I just wanted to talk about this, right? So what they're talking about and what Wargonzo's admitting is that if this gets breached here, then actually it is plain sailing down to Mariupol in terms of all of these defensive lines. Much more difficult over here towards Tokmak, and this is where the Ukrainians are losing more vehicles. Whereas over here in Velika Novosilka, there's potentially more success. However, the area that they've taken really quickly in Velika Novosilka is these towns all the way down to Starominivka. The reason why Morgonzo is saying that's important, and really, towns just around that, is this is where that defensive line is. So this is Brady Afric's mapping, open source mapping of where the Russians have built all their fortifications. So the Ukrainians are doing a really great job around here, taking all this land really quite easily. But actually, they haven't got to the defenses yet. And when they do, that will be problematic, because if you come over here, this is where they're getting stuck at the moment in some of these defensive fortifications and minefields and all the thought that the Russians have put into that. They don't have that issue so much in Velika Novosilka. This is all kind of open land the Russians control, but they haven't really built defenses there. However, if they are able to take the defenses, there's only seems to be one proper line of defense here. So if they can breach that, then this is what Kenneth Gregg is saying, that actually it's plain sailing down to Mariupol. Obviously, that's an exaggeration, but you get the point. You can use your roads, you can get down there. There won't be these huge minefields and fortifications to negotiate. It seems like that could be a weak point. They haven't built the second line of defense, possibly all across there. It may be able to get the Ukrainians may be able to get through that easily, and that could be why they're trying to press down here. I don't know, but they're having success there, possibly because there are fewer fortifications, if that makes sense. Right, Andrea Perpetua has done a really good synopsis over the whole front line. Just really quickly, there may be a Ukrainian breach in the Svatova area. There may be Ukrainian advances in the Dobrova area of the forest south of Kremina. Again, if you don't know where all these places are, check my frontline update. So there's activity going on there. There's activity taking place around Bakhmut and north of Bakhmut. Russia's multi-day counterattack in Berkivka ended in failure. They could not push Ukraine back. Ukraine is beginning to move forward again. They moved 50 to 100 meters today. Some say 250 meters, but that's likely overly optimistic. Not too much change south of Bakhmut and onwards to Avdiivka. Avdiivka, both sides have lost quite a lot of troops apparently in that area with lots of fighting. Mariinka, no real change. Vuhledar, no information. And then in the areas I've told you about, Velika Novosilka, there's all that progress being made. Hlyapole, rumors that the Ukrainians have captured Marfapil. I see no evidence. Orikhiv area, Ukraine has gone on several disastrous large-scale attacks with little known success. They've lost a lot of vehicles there. The blast markers and tractor icons, he says, are all damaged and destroyed vehicles. So you can see that there's quite a lot of evidence that they've struggled. And in the Vasilivka area, Ukraine has possible advances there, and that's towards the big reservoir there. So that's to say, success around here. finding it more difficult around Orikhiv. Haleipole, maybe some advances, and some advances in the area towards Vasilivka here. So, uh, uh, is it a mixed bag? I mean, having lost a bunch of equipment around here, I don't know what the advances may or may not be. There's obviously operational security going on. Michael Weiss says some tentative chatter from Western sources that things in southern Ukraine are going well. Early days yet, but off the record optimism is less guarded than might otherwise be expected for what it's worth. So he's saying, I know some people, he's got loads of contacts. He says, I know some people and all happy in a way that's less guarded than you expect it to be. Like, actually, things are going pretty well. That said, there are some really serious bits of kit that have been lost. And then Ben Hodges, in an article for CEPA, says if you think Ukraine's offensive has started, wait for the heavy brigades. So he's saying that basically you ain't seen nothing yet type thing. You know, Ukrainian tank battalion normally has 31 tanks. An armored infantry battalion would have about the same number. Add in armored vehicles carrying engineers, air defense, logistics, and so on. An armored brigade would likely have 3 tank battalions and 1 or 2 mechanized infantry battalions in total. Then an armored brigade is going to have 250 plus armored vehicles of different types, right? And you've got a bunch of those. So today, I don't think we've witnessed this concentration of several hundred tanks and infantry fighting vehicles. These are still, as he says, when we see 2 or 3 of those brigades, around 500 to 750 armored vehicles, focus on a narrow front, then it's possible to say that the main attack has started. So these are still probing attacks. We're still in that phase, and again, there are going to be heavy losses. It's the heavy losses of the equipment they have the least of, which are these particular almost bespoke vehicles that are needed for breaching. Losing them is big. Anyway, moving on to other odds and sods. Commander of the Russian volunteer group, Denis Nikitin, was present at a prisoner of war exchange where every Russian soldier was offered the option to join the RDK. Among them was Vladislav Ismailov, who refused to return to Russia and expressed a desire to join the ranks of RDK. Ismailov was not from the Russian military, but was instead a PMC Wagner member who was freed from a Samara prison to serve in the PMC and was later captured in November last year. Evgeny Prigozhin reacted by confirming the identity of the Russian and promised to find and kill him. This is from Prigozhin. Actually, Vladislav Ismailov arrived in the PMC Wagner from the Samara colony, and in November he was captured. Vladislav Ismailov is a traitor. I'm sure he will receive a worthy punishment according to the traditions of PMC Wagner. In other words, he'll get a sledgehammer to the head. I hope we will find him and kill him in a fair fight. It appears no one else from the Russian group of POWs wished to stay or join the RDK, showing that Ismailov likely has a good reason to do so. Then Kadyrov's Akhmat forces, so these are special forces for the Chechens, are now officially under the Defense Minister Shoigu's control, waiting for Prigozhin's Wagner mercenaries now. This is the desire for Shoigu and the Russian Ministry of Defense to take mercenary units under their control and to, I guess, stop these conflicts taking place between disparate groups, to try and make it more of a uniform approach, even though arguably these mercenary groups have had more success than the conventional Russian units. Prigozhin's not up for this, and we will see this continue, no doubt. Right, as the flooding has taken place and the reservoir has receded, there's been interesting findings that have been made. I mean, in America, in the US, there's a reservoir that's losing a lot of water over the last few years, drought and climate change and all that, and it's I don't know how many meters below its normal levels it is, but they've started to find bodies, murder victims have been tied to a barrel, and the mobs killed them like 80 years ago and stuff. You're finding really interesting, like often macabre things. Well, actually, this was a site of Second World War conflict, and that's starting to be uncovered. So Kokovka Reservoir is empty, and the remains of the war dead come to light. This is German war dead from World War II. Germany's Volksbund collects, identifies, and takes care of the remains of German troops. So this is August 43 to January 44. A giant battle was fought between 4 million Soviet soldiers and 1.2 million German and Romanian soldiers along the Dnipro River. 500,000 people died, many disappearing into the swamps of the old riverbed. And then, there you go. They are being uncovered now. Right. On May the 16th, the Patriots radar detected the missiles, including 6 Kinjals at a distance of about 125 miles. The system's computer tracked the missiles and launched interceptors, destroying all of them. The last at a distance of about 9 miles. So some more detail is coming out of those ballistic missile, those hypersonic missiles that were thrown at Kyiv, and the Patriot taking them out. And this being, these are supposedly the Dagger, the Kinjal missiles, being the missiles that couldn't be taken out, and indeed they were. And this is showing the Patriots' value. Anyway, some details about that, which then leads on to the military aid section, which starts here with, for me, Greg Hayes, CEO of Patriot contractor Raytheon, reports that they will increase the production to 12 batteries per year and plan to deliver 5 by the end of next year. We are very surprised at its effectiveness, shooting down 90% of incoming threats. That is 5 batteries to Ukraine by the end of next year. What would be great is if other countries could get 5 to Ukraine now, and Raytheon provide those 5 to the other countries. I mean, do the other countries need their Patriots right now being used? I don't know. I think it's more important that you have a Patriot system operating somewhere near Zaporizhia to help near the front lines to stop the Russian VKS being active in close air support of their own troops. That would be my opinion. But I'm just a bloke sitting on a laptop on the south coast of the UK. Defense Minister Alexei Reznikov said that he was taking commander of the Air Force, Nikolai Oleshchuk, to the meeting in Ramstein, since the supply of fighter jets would be its main topic. The next meeting will be held on the 15th of June at the NATO headquarters in Brussels, Belgium. So the Ramstein meeting, the kind of like what can the Allies help Ukraine with? Top of the list will be, let's sort out these airframes. Let's sort out this coalition of F-16 providers and possibly other aircraft as well. So military aid, this is interesting. So we were under the impression that the Americans had given Bradley M2A2s to Ukrainians, but here we have evidence that we've got an A3. I didn't know the Ukrainians received the A3s, says the Dead District. Now, what is the A3? So the M2 Bradley is the infantry fighting vehicle that there's actually quite a few of these have been lost in that area. As many as 16 have been lost now already, which is quite worrying. But the M2 variants, so you've got the M2A2, which was originally introduced in 1988, so throughout the 90s. You've got the M2A3, produced from 2000 onwards, and it upgrades, it makes it totally digital. As you can see from that image, there was digital screen on there, upgraded, improved existing electronic systems throughout, target acquisition, fire control, navigation, situation awareness. So all the kind of functionality that you get from modern tech, a lot of that will be in there in a much improved way to previous variants. So that it's interesting that they have those. I don't know how many they have of those, but that'll be much more useful than the M2A2s, which is still a good piece of kit, right? Okay, Ukraine asks Germany for more Leopard 2 tanks. Unsurprising, they've lost a bunch, writes NTV. The Ukrainian army most urgently needs many more Western battle tanks, infantry fighting vehicles, and other armoured vehicles, said Deputy Foreign Minister Andriy Melnik. Now, they are going to be losing vehicles, of course they are, and I've talked about how they will get a provision, certainly to begin with, of other vehicles that are going through the training, like the CV-90 of Sweden, CV-90, the infantry fighting vehicle. They don't have those, I don't think, in Ukraine yet, or they've been sent on their way, and they're still being trained on a bunch in Sweden. So that's something that will be able to fill in the gaps left by damaged and vehicles and attrition on the front lines. You will need just a continual supply of vehicles, and Germany, the argument here, as they set out here, is that actually Germany has 300 or so they could do with they could easily get by. So the claim is of giving a bunch more to Ukraine. Um, that will be an ongoing challenge because the Western nations and allies will have been seen to have given what they easily could to give more tanks. Main battle tanks is to dip further into those reserves that serve this function for those countries' armed forces. The question is, okay, if you're not fighting here and now, how are you going to use those vehicles? Unless China's going to roll into Germany, it's going to be about fighting against Russia. So you might as well give them to Ukraine to do that fight for you type thing. I mean, that's been my advice the whole time. Uh, so personally, I would give virtually all of Britain's Challenger tanks, bar a couple to train on, and say, right, this is what they're designed for. This is what they're supposed to. This is who they're supposed to be used against. Pretty much, you can have all of them. We ain't going to use them. If we get, who's going to invade the UK? As a who's who's going to send tanks onto UK soil? So we're probably not going to need them in the next 3 years. We'll hopefully get some built to replace them. Let's just give all our challenges to, or most of our challenges to Ukraine. Why not? That's my theory, and I stand by it. Okay, and the last bit of news is on geopolitics. Hardly any geopolitical news today. Tbilisi, so this is the Georgian capital, plans to complete 12 reforms of European integration so that the country can become an EU candidate in December, says Irakli Kobakidze, a leader of the ruling party of the country's Georgian Dream party. So Georgian Dream were elected to be, and they had this kind of pro-European stance. The Georgian public is generally pro-European, a bit like Ukraine. Really, there's a lot of similarities. But as Georgian Dream have been ruling, they have kind of slanted more and more towards Russia and a pro-Kremlin outlook. So this is maybe them realizing that actually the swell of public opinion doesn't really sit behind being pro-Russian. So I don't know if this is paying lip service to being pro-European, or whether this is them genuinely, realigning themselves as a governing party, because there have been some pretty massive protests in Georgia, and they haven't been happy with the Georgian Dream Party reopening the air routes to Moscow, to Russia, after 4 years of not having them open. They've not been happy with that. A big protest about that wedding party, I think, that was taking place in Georgia, with sanctioned Russian elite. Huge protest. So yeah, I'm not sure. Interesting political melting pot, I guess, Georgia at the moment, and we'll see how that goes. But this will send an interesting message to the Kremlin for sure. I would think. Anyway, thank you for watching. That's a news update today. Lots of stuff on the front line. Not too much. That's taking up a lot of the bandwidth, as you can imagine, in terms of the news. I mean, that's the central kind of component of the news about the Ukraine war is the war bit. And so as the counteroffensive is taking place, that will take up more and more of this news video. Anyway, as ever, thank you so much for your support. Please like, subscribe, and share. Take care, and I'll speak to you soon. And whoop-de-whoop, I'm over like 17,000 subscribers now or something. It's been a funny old couple of weeks. Really, really, really quick growth for me. I mean, I'm tiny compared to all these other big YouTubers, but thank you anyway. Thank you to all my lovely members. You're all amazing.